Yeah, one of the things we've been talking about, it's been a bit of a theme on the podcast, is this idea of, it's gotten easier to collect this kind of feedback. And we've been talking about that, like, people are tech enabled, you go get this stuff. How do you think about synthesizing that feedback? I mean, we're talking about how do you bring the engineering team along, but as you go up into more senior leadership, as you're trying to get buy-in with the marketing team or the CEO or the sales team in a B2B context of decisions, what do you have any thoughts on how to kind of share these insights or ways that you see to kind of align the company around what customers are saying? Because that's also, part of the challenge is as a
Yeah.
product manager is like, you don't just have to get the engineering team going. You kind of got to get everybody going the same direction.
Yeah, we have. I think one of the rules in product research rule is like insights are best shared, and sort of the subtext rule is never write a report, right? You don't want to just write this big long report and just send it around and say, here, go read this, because one, they're rarely ever read. But part of it is how do you bring people along for the ride? How do you bring them along in the journey in some way? Can you involve them before even just the insights are generated, right? So I'll take the example of a design sprint because it sort of nicely encapsulates to some degree. How do you involve an executive in design sprint? That was a question I get asked a lot after I wrote that book. It's like, well, first include them in just like the first half hour of the first day of when you're doing your assumption storming and trying to understand the problem you're solving, getting that context. I was like, you only need them there for the first part so that they have the opportunity to co-create with you and shape the problem you're trying to solve. Then bring them in again at the end of the third day when you've gotten your sketches ready and before you start prototyping, like, hey, these are the solutions we think we're going to try and build and prototype and test. And then bring them in again at the end of the last day and say, hey, look, we tested this and these are some of the videos from our conversations. These are some of the things we learned, right? So you've brought them along the way, and it's not like they just showed up at the end and said, here's what we got. They've actually have more visibility into the whole journey. So I think that's the hard part sometimes is obviously all leaders and executives are busy, but how do you find the way to include them, right? It's the ask of being co-creative to some degree. And can you get their input along the way and bring them along that journey? That's probably the best, most effective. It's hard. It's not as easy, but that's probably the best way I've seen teams do that.
I really like that. I talk about this concept of participatory leadership, which is sort of
Mhm.
enabling leaders with the opportunity to participate along the way, because it's really hard as a senior leader at the end of a process to be given sort of a binary choice of approve or don't approve this thing. It's like, well, the team's been working on it, and it disapprove is a hard, like, no, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
But you sort of get stuck with like, well, this is, it's a binary choice. And I think if you have a chance as a leader, and I really like the way you laid that out, like in the very beginning, as we're setting up the assumptions and what we're going to go do, it's at one or two critical points along the way, and then in the end product, you sort of get buy-in along the way. And I think that's really good guidance.
Yeah. I think the other thing is also when you're presenting things too, if you're presenting somebody who's coming in at the end, don't start with the beginning, right? Tell them like, we've actually start with your conclusions first. Like, here's where we ended. And then let me tell you how we got here, right? Because what you don't want to do is bring them on this journey, like in a presentation, and they come to a different conclusion, then you can say like, okay, all right. Yeah. And then they're like, wait, how did you get that conclusion from that start, right? You don't want to do that. But start out with that conclusion first and like, let me tell you how we got here and why. And that starts to paint a better way to, if you're just doing a presentation for maybe, a secondary or tertiary stakeholder, sometimes that's super useful.